Woo! Welcome to another film flashback. This is a spooky one. This is Matthew as usual, joined by Nick. And today we've got a great friend, Jessa, to join us so we can talk about the 1996 teenage witch, I don't know what you'd call it, comedy, horror, called The Craft.
Ah! Oh boy.
To the other kids at St. Bernard Academy, they were the girls who didn't belong.
I don't want to go out with you again. Please stop begging. It's pathetic.
4 girls are about to discover the dark side.
You ever heard of invoking the spirit? Black magic.
The Craft.
I'm so excited to talk about this movie. I mean, it opens up and it couldn't be more 90s. The music is 90s as it gets. You've got just the hairstyles, and every 90s actor that you loved from that moment was there. And it was like, it was almost like being taken back in time, where I went, boom, it's 1996 all over again. And I was just like there, just ready for some Snap-on bracelets and some Walkman action.
Yeah. I feel like we're way under our flannel quota that we need for this talkback for this movie, because there's so much
baby
flannel.
baby girl like barrettes.
That's
like brown lipstick. Oh my gosh.
Clay usually wears those baby girl barrettes for the show, but no, he didn't tonight.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I left. I studied sugar. Yeah. So this movie, if you don't have a clear memory of it, it's about basically new girl in school at a Catholic high school. New girl in school, and she has her typical new girl in school at the movie problems, where it's like, how do I fit in? Oh, well, these people are being fake nice to me, but these people I can't tell if they're actually mean. And it's like, how do I figure it out? Like, it's that Mean Girls vibe. And she ends up settling in with being friends with the 3 girls that everybody knows are witches, which I thought was really funny. Like, they just tell everybody that, and it's not, they're not the goth girls. They're not the girls who are listening to Marilyn Manson or something. They're witches, and that's what everybody calls them. And I was like, cool. So this movie just kind of like gets you right into it. Some of them are a little bit like sort of tropes, the characters, but only at the beginning, because they really keep the cast nice and limited to where it's only like 5 or 6 people who get a lot of screen time. And so it ends up being better than just a movie about tropes. But what were your first impressions on the rewatch, Jessa?
Well, so this movie holds such like a special place for me, which sounds weird if you've seen this movie, because it's definitely not like a warm and fuzzy movie. It's definitely like...
We watched Tremors 2 weeks ago, so don't worry about it.
But I remember like this movie and another movie, Now and Then, when they came out, and oh man, it was like right before I was even, I think, in middle school, like just breaching into middle school. And we dressed like these girls. We'd pick out who we were. We'd all trade characters that we were going to be, and then we'd take on their persona. And like, I believed I was part of the craft. Absolutely.
So, question for you. So one thing I noticed in this movie, and like, I remember watching this so many times, and it's probably because of Nev Campbell.
Too.
But I remember this was like when I was in high school and middle school, this movie was on like HBO all the time. Before you could, for our younger viewers out there, you used to not be able to pick what you're going to watch. It was just, hey, this thing is on, and you just watch it. And so I've probably seen this like 10 to 20 times. And so one thing I noticed throughout this movie that I definitely didn't notice as a kid is, and when we start the movie, except for, oh God, I already get it butchered. Frieza Bulk, who's amazing in this. Besides her character, everyone else is wearing like sundresses and like fun colors and like springtime. And then as the movie progresses and they turn more bad, they start to wear darker colors.
Yeah.
And then the witch starts going. So Jessa, when you guys were imitating these characters, were you like I'm this witch, I'm just gonna wear this
Oh yeah, we picked which
dress.
one of us was going to be like the bad witch, and I think it definitely got like this movie and Clueless definitely at some point became one. So like just the schoolgirl dresses, like anything to be like sexy, like over the knees, sexy for let's say a like 12-year-old or 10-year-old. And so like, I'm gonna wear.
Let's
like,
not say.
Yeah, let's not say that. But as a girl, you're like, oh, this is like edgy. But like
Breckin Meyer, a link between those two movies, I think. Isn't he in Clueless too?
Yeah,
he is.
Yeah.
So
like
you know what
90s.
funny? So Jessa, you grew up in LA. I did not. I grew up in the suburbs in Florida, and one of the crazy things to me, we all live in LA now. We're all scattered around LA, and we all work in the industry. The craziest thing to me now is I see this guy Breckin. Was it Breckin
Meyer?
Breckin Meyer.
Yeah.
Who we recognize from Road Trip. He's in The Craft. He's in Clueless. He's in all these movies. I see that guy. I've seen him 100+ times in Trader Joe's. Right? Literally at the grocery store. Not like, when you're a kid, you're like, oh my God, that guy's famous. He's in all these movies. And now it's like, yeah, that guy just goes to my grocery store. Like I say, like, not too long ago, I see Gavin Rossdale from Bush walking down the street. And I'm like, I guess that's what happened. And it's true. It happens folks out there. Like if you live in LA, that's what happens.
I gotta say, I had the biggest crush on him. Weird crush moment. I totally had such a big crush, especially like in like The Craft. In other movies, he's definitely more of a likable character, but like definitely had a crush on him.
And I thought you were gonna say Suits.
No, not Suits.
Okay, so you and your friends used to get together and you decide who you are, pretending to be characters from The Craft. Nick, if you had to be a character from The Craft, which character?
Everybody would fight over being the lead girl. Everyone wanted to be like,
oh really? Everyone
wants
to be. Well, I guess by the end, when she's sort of a superhero, but
wait, would you fight to be the main girl or Fairuza Balk's character?
No, definitely the main girl. Absolutely. She like everybody always wanted to be her because she ends up with the most power. And so like you play these games where like, and now that I think about it, I'm like, who let us play these games where we were like pricking our fingers with needles and drinking each other's blood? Like that wasn't a good idea.
Yep.
That was a COVID-9 for those listeners.
Yeah.
I really have not thought about this part of my childhood in a long time.
It's the best. No,
so
you said when you were like 12.
Yeah, and it might have even been younger than that, but I distinctly remember, and we did like light as a feather, stiff as a board, like, and we were convinced that we made it work. I mean, in my memory it did, but probably not. I think you lie to yourself enough that you're like, oh yeah, it happened.
So I remember seeing this too, and I might have even been young enough to still think, and I think we had this conversation about being ninjas and being able to do magic. At what point did you think you might still be able to do magic, or that you think you might be able to do magic? Like there's a window, and for almost every kid,
is there a window?
I might be able to do magic.
Does that window end?
Jessa hasn't ended.
I'm sorry, that's a very personal question, and I feel personally attacked by it. Because
you're probably just a late bloomer. You're just a late bloomer. Don't worry about it.
I don't know what you're talking about. What window?
It's a door. It's a door.
I mean, sometimes, there's like squirrels and butterflies in my backyard. Did they arrive there on their own? Who's to say?
Exactly. Maybe you are Snow White. Who knows?
Who... And I mean, my dog definitely talks to the squirrels,
There's just a minor language barrier, and I feel like you're almost there.
Yep. We're not going to elaborate on this because later when I reflect back on the fact that I did this live stream with you and realized I got 2 hours of sleep the night before, filmed the entire day, drank a beer before coming on live, I'm going to be like, oh, good.
All right, so
have another
magic.
So Jessa does many facets, works in the entertainment industry. If you were to act as one of these parts, which one would you do you think?
What's
the juiciest?
Ooh. I sort of like the Nev Campbell. I think like she definitely like I like that character because there's a lot of fun behavior when I look at actors now since I don't act anymore. Like I look at actors in terms of like how would I want to direct them or how would I want to like redirect them. And a lot of the time when I'm watching movies, because obviously I'm such a way better director than every director that I watch their movie. No, I'm just kidding. But like I always am like, ooh, it'd be really interesting if her behavior was like this, and this could be a cool reveal. Like I always thought the reveal of her scars could have been so much more interesting. And I always thought what happened to her could have was it a birthmark? Was it maybe I missed it, but I never was clear on that.
I didn't notice either. I was kind of waiting, and then so if it happened, I missed it, and that was kind of strange too. But I thought my answer for who I would choose to be and who I would get cast in are probably the same. They're probably both the Nev Campbell character, because when it's like the idea of you're like the sort of one who believes, but you're sort of shy about it. But then later on, you come out of your shell, and now you're being a big jerk. I'm like, I can do. I can do both those things but it's like also she basically heals herself. I mean, like, having a scar removed is a little bit different than like sewing up a new wound, but it was like, that is the number one superpower, to be able to heal yourself. I was like, I don't know. I think I would choose that.
Yeah. What about you, Nick?
Well, is Nev Campbell's character like the Icarus? Where it's like, oh wow, I can do this, and like she's like goes from doing like very quiet, and then gets his power, and then it's like, oh wait, I've gone too far. Well, I guess they kind of all, you could look at them all like that. If I'm reading the script, I'm taking Fairuza Balk's character. It's the one role in the movie where you can't imagine anyone else playing that. No. I saw where Angelina Jolie was up for one of the roles in this. And my guess would be that even at this time, she was probably too big of a name, I would think. But she probably wanted that character. Like if I would think you wouldn't want to play the main girl, right? The other girls would be way more fun to play. Yeah, but the Fairuza Balk character to me.
I think she would have been capable of it, like Angelina Jolie in Hackers. You could see that Angelina Jolie playing. Yeah. That character. I mean, she's a talented actress, of course, so that was a big possibility. But it's so when this movie begins, it begins with it's raining in LA, and I was like, ooh, it is a magic movie. And the first song is a Beatles cover. There's a couple of famous covers on this soundtrack. The soundtrack itself it's like 1996 in a bottle, but in this way where it's like this sort of alternative radio, like college radio rock with like Space Hog.
Let me throw some bands at you. We got Our Lady Peace, Sponge, POTUS Head, Tripping Daisy, Space Hog, among others. Amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, these are bands that unless you were like between a certain age at that time, you don't remember a single one of those names. But
you hear that music and you're like, boom, you're right back there.
You're in, you're in it.
And I think in a good way, because it just like it drops you in, and it always, they never intended the movie to feel like it was another time. It was supposed to feel like you were in that time. They were kind of trying to capture it. But I think they did. She ends up in this giant house. Her parents move in. It's always funny, but that's normal in movies about teenagers. Their parents have these nondescript jobs, and they have a lot of money. Yeah. And so she's like living in this giant house. She tries to make friends with everybody, but it's like it doesn't work out. But I love how much in it where you and I look at it and we go, oh, it is just a little fantastic. It's just a little beyond normal. Like when they're standing in the school hallway and Fairuza Balk's character Nancy is goofing around in her locker and she's got a full noose that is hanging and she's just like swinging on it like playfully like la 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 la. Or like you can't do that in a school.
So is that all right, I don't want to go too off the deep end on like dark stuff, but is that a pre 9/11 thing? Can you imagine them putting that in like a movie post 9/11? A noose in a locker?
Exactly that event, but
I don't think it's 9/11. I would say like more like around this is dark, but more like around Columbine.
Columbine's, yeah.
After that, like,
yeah.
Point being, 1996 was basically
free.
An excerpt from the 80s. Like up until about 99, we were still very 80s-ish, and I don't know. There's no way. I guess
that feels in a way more dated than like the music.
Yeah,
and stuff like that. The like open racism against Rachel True's character, and it's like, I don't know.
And what do you guys think, like, if this movie were to be, because the whole time I'm watching it, obviously, like, I'm a director, so my mind is like, how would this movie be made today? What do you think? I thought her, her sort of reaction and the racist comments, like, that would be something that I would want to continue to explore today, and how that feeds into her high school experience. But I felt like the scars, and I felt like, having all this power and finding a boy, like, yes, those are sort of timeless themes. But I think with everything that's happened from Me Too on, like, I just feel like you would want to explore deeper. Like, what would you guys think? Like, if it was, because that's what I was wondering. Like, if it was made today, what would you think, like, some of those things that women, because now women, like my little sister, for instance, she's, she is 19, having gone through Me Too, having had this empowerment. She talks in a way like I never even knew how to talk until I was in my late 20s about, like, being empowered and the way she stands up to guys and like that. There was an almost rape scene in this movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine a high school movie today coming out with an almost rape scene? Like, that's...
Well, not only that, the Skeeter Ulrich character is basically Pepe Le Pew after the spell gets put on him. Like...
Yeah.
And that's like, is that a cartoon appropriate anymore? Probably not.
Yes. So we should probably explain some of the things that we're saying. Yeah. We're just talking about very general. So one of the things that ends up happening is this particular character played by Skeet Ulrich. And so Skeet Ulrich ends up in the same calendar year, within a year of this. He and Nev Campbell in Scream after this, which I think they look way older in Scream than they do in this movie somehow. But Skeet Ulrich plays the sort of main male part in it, and he's kind of this jerky, womanizing teenager. And so to get back at him, they cast a spell. She casts a spell, specifically Robin Tunney's character, Sarah, casts a spell on him to make him, and he ends up being passionately, but totally without consciousness, just madly in love with her. And Pepe Le Pew is exactly it. But it's like funny at first, and then it's annoying, and then when she actually agrees to be alone with him, he can't control himself, and we're like, all right, unless she fights him off, it's just full rape now is about to happen. And it was like, man, this is getting out of hand. But I like that they bothered with as the screenwriters, because they said, here's an idea. Somebody gives somebody else a love potion. And it's like, we've seen that in sitcoms since the 50s. Okay, but this isn't a sitcom. What would really happen? It would get scary is what would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did it. And I was kind of like, well, they followed the conceit through to like a logical, frightening place. And I was like, yeah, that's where it would go if such a thing was real.
Yeah. And I feel like there's been Charmed, and there's been the new Charmed, and there's Sabrina the Teenage Witch that's on. Nothing in my mind speaks about witches as much as this movie. Like, it hit to a core of like an edginess. And I just wonder, like, what that would be today. Like, if you did that scene today, like, what would that look like? Like, what would that be?
I think 100% this movie holds up. There's no doubt to me that it holds up, because even the style from the 90s is back.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's nothing in it where I go like, nah. I think if you were to remake this, which this would be a remake that a lot of people would go and see it, as long as it was cast correctly. Like, this movie, the pacing, we were talking during the movie, the pacing in this movie is really good, especially for a 90s movie.
Agreed.
There's no, like, enough so where I think for a modern audience, and I'd say like younger audience, which scenes don't typically breathe as much, or there's not as many long takes unless it's a Tarantino movie, but it's a rapid pace. And so we don't learn why Nev Campbell has the burn marks, but it's like, okay, she's got the thing. We don't learn all these character flaws. We see it very quickly and we get it. So I think in a modern way, I think the only things you'd have to change, a little bit of the dialogue and a little bit of, I do think, Jess, your point about your sister being like very feminist, I do think you would have one character who I would think would be like the Nev Campbell character, who's probably been picked on her whole life. She's got this thing. She probably has I don't know who it would be, but I think that very easily you can modernize this. I don't think it'd be a lot of adjustments.
I don't think that the female characters show any kind of like weakness or hesitancy that would be perceived as weakness. We're just not using the same buzzwords, and it's more like, isn't it surprising that the stuff is in the movie at all?
Yeah.
Instead of like people going, that's a hot button, I don't want to push that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I just rewatched last night Jurassic Park, the first one, and it was interesting watching Laura Dern, who also has a brief moment in this movie in the beginning. Also, she I know
what moment you're talking about. Yeah,
you do, right? In the Jurassic Park, and she makes a comment about like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna have like
because Hammond, the old man. He looks at her and he's to the walkie-talkie and he goes, "It really should be me going." She's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because I'm a, and you're a." She goes, "Look, we can talk about sexism in survival situations when I get back."
Exactly. And it's like, and then you watch like movies like that don't hold up, like American Pie and things like that, where you're like cringe, you know, through so many, or like we were just talking about this, something about Mary, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I laughed at this at some point. Like this is like, ugh. But I look at this movie and I think like I would love to see them be even more empowered and be today learning what empowerment means in 2020, which is something totally different than it meant in 1996 or 93. When was it?
By even your word choice, because in a way I think that's what the movie is sort of about. It's about empowerment. So you've got these girls who are things like they can't control their situations, right? You've got Fairuza Balk's character Nancy can't control the fact that she lives in a situation that she doesn't like with people that she doesn't like, and then things like that. And that is true, especially when you're like a teenager. It's true, you have so little control over certain kinds of circumstances around you. And, you've got these male characters who apparently do whatever they want, like the Skeet Ulrich Chris character does whatever he wants with women and gets away with it, apparently. And so over the course of the movie, they become quite literally empowered.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Take over their circumstances. And then there's a third act where they have to learn about what that means. Now that they have power, now how does one responsibly use power? And so they get like all the way through to that very important level of the. So I mean, I think the movie's sort of about empowerment in a way.
That's a really good point. That's super interesting. Yeah, I would be really interested to see. I feel like that particular time in history was like capsuled, like you said, in this like special period. But I would be very curious to see how it's interpreted today and what those themes now mean. Like definitely listening. I went to my sister's graduation and listening to every one of the kids get up and make a speech. None of them were like, oh, I'm going to be a famous actor and I'm going to like get this, I need to go off and like achieve this glory. It was all like, I want to go and I want to change this social norm. And I want to make sure that like I help this other, I don't know. It's just a different generation. They've lived through some crazy stuff, whereas I feel like in the 90s, I was just like blissfully skipping into high school wearing my knee-high socks. That our
generation skipped most wars until like, it wasn't until the end of, I mean, I was senior when 9/11 happened. We skipped most like the hard times, like realistically, we didn't really get it. You know what I noticed in this, and I have a note in here, like where's everyone's, we only see Fairuza Balk's parents, like it's like Charlie Brown's parents the whole time with all these other families, and like, it's pretty clear that, again, we all live in LA. The house that they move into is very nice. Like, that's a multi-million-dollar house. Yeah. And when she escapes the rape scene, she runs across Mulholland Drive, it looks like, to her friend's house. Like, I don't know.
To Rochelle's house. Yeah.
I can count on less than one finger how many people I know on Mulholland Drive.
I grew up off of Mulholland Drive, but I lived with my grandparents.
You're my one that I know. That
one finger. I think that I like that that this movie is thematically interesting. Sometimes you get a movie where it's stylistically interesting, but it kind of reserves the same themes to you back. But this one, I think, was like a new spin on a kind of coming in of age new girl thing, which is great because it's like you don't want something to be so new that it's unrelatable. But it was a great idea. Someone's like, no, we've heard that story before. A new girl comes to new high school and you go, no, you don't understand. She gets together with the outcasts and they like roll their eyes. Yeah, we got it. And you go, no, they're like into witchcraft, and you go, yawn, and you go, no, but it works. They actually like achieve witch powers, and you go, oh. And what they did is when they explored each character, I love how much time we spent with the Chris character, with Skeet Ulrich. It was amazing how much screen time he gets, considering that he's just there. Like, he personally isn't well developed, but his character is so important for our main character's development that it's like, I was really pleased when I looked up. It was when they finally get that what you send out gets back 3 times rule, like when that kind of thing. That's like the movie's half over already, but it didn't feel slow. It's just that they were spending a lot of time. They spend like at least the whole first half of the movie just making sure that all the thematic elements are getting their proper due, especially because we kind of have 4 main characters. And
yeah.
So it takes a lot of time to get to know 4 main characters.
But it is a constant build, I felt like. There was no like wasted scenes in this movie. At least that made the final cut. Like, everything was like elevated each time there was a scene, whether it be elevating the character, elevating the powers, whatever it was. Like, I still think that the pacing holds up. It's not slow by any stretch.
Well, why do you think young girls come to this movie? They're not coming to see it because they're like, oh, I want to see them basically get to the point where the powers turn against them. You're going to see all this. You're going to see the popcorn. You're going to see when their powers are working for them. Mm. So I think, in my opinion, it's a pretty amazing choice to keep it that like all the way basically till almost page like 60. You really don't have like a tremendous. You always have the threat of what's her name, the more evil. The more
Elizabeth Falk.
Yeah, you always have her like sort of like sort of dancing with danger, but you don't really have a real threat until like later on in the movie, because like that's not what people are coming to watch. They're coming to watch like, what kind of cool things are you going to do with magic?
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's like they managed to take they take as much time as they need to build it all the way up, and so that means that it's always building. Its snowball is always getting bigger, which is great because you don't have this moment early on where there's too much going on, and then we have to try to find a way to raise the stakes for the third act. It happens a lot in musicals where like the best number is in the first act, and you go to the intermission and you're like, I thought we heard every song already. What the heck else is in this? But that doesn't happen in here. And I don't even know if this is true. I could be totally talking out of my ass, but that feels a little bit feminine to me, because you just said something about that's why girls were going to see this movie. And I go, if the movie was trying to aim at the boys in their 8th grade class instead, they probably would have made some of the choices a little different.
Knee-high socks.
Typical boy would have been like, well, the boy would have said, I need someone to blow something up with their magical powers in the first 15 minutes. I need to see something go. I want to see some action. There would be more than just one fight at the end. You would have made the movie different if you were trying to appeal to 13-year-old males, wouldn't you?
But I think this movie was edgy for the time. Like, so I think watching it was always like a privilege, especially at that age. It was kind of like you were getting away with watching a movie that was quote unquote for young adults. But I always felt, at least, Nick, tell me if I'm wrong, but I always felt like I was getting away with watching it. Like, I knew it was maybe a little, and I'm a little bit younger than you, sorry, but like I always felt like I'm a little too young to be watching this movie, and I'm like kind of getting away with something. And it's like, it was edgy at the time when it came out, for sure. Like, my mom was like, you can't watch that movie, you always get scared. And I did. I always got scared.
Especially edgy if your family is Christian.
Ooh.
So you guys are
really like just drinking blood and like summoning like the pagan gods.
You guys are a little bit younger than me, so this is a R-rated movie.
Oh,
and
I did not know that.
Yeah,
wow.
and it has, so every guideline, there's no blood, like the very minimal, like they're pricking their fingers, use a little bit of blood. The only thing that causes this movie to be rated R, which they couldn't get around, is because it has teenage girls doing witchcraft. That's the only reason. There's no F-bombs, there's no swearing, there's not not really a lot of like violence comparatively.
Rape scene. I feel like that would be
not even that does, and at least at the time not considered. There's more violence in Ninja Turtles, which is PG, than there is in this movie.
They say the story goes that director Andrew Fleming, like afterwards, was like, "Wait a minute! I followed all the rules. There's no nudity. There's only like one curse word." And they were like, "You made a movie about teenagers like summoning a pagan god like witches. You just never going to be anything less." Like, he's like, "Well, if I'd known that, I would have dropped 20 more F-bombs."
Yeah.
This movie would have been full of a lot more fun stuff.
So even being rated R, and Jess, we talk about like, it is like you. I mean, again, I'm a few years older, but I remember I didn't watch this in the theater, and so one of the things we have to do with film Flashback, we always talk about like, yes, this came out in 1996. I probably saw it in like 1998. So I was probably in high school or like late middle school. I might have seen it a little bit before that. I didn't see it in the theater because it's rated R. You guys would have been a little bit younger than I would. But at the time when I saw it, I still remember thinking like, this is really good. Like, this is just a good movie. Also, you have Neve Campbell, and I had certainly seen Scream. So I think guys were into it. Like, Clay, you're talking about like 12-year-old kids wouldn't want to see it. You know why they are into it? Because Neve Campbell and all the other girls in the movie. Like, that's why the guys see it. But one thing I thought was interesting, and I talk about the pacing, but I also think what makes it's like it lives in its. So we meet the four girls very early, and we're already interested. Like, it's a very self-contained story. Like, we don't meet the parents. We don't meet anyone's parents except Fruza Balks, who are, that has to do with her character. But other than that, we don't know anything else except we meet Skeet Ulrich. There's like very few amount of characters, so we can kind of just hone in on like what's going on with these four girls and their bond and their friendship. So we can like move that forward to become this big thing, and they'll become witches. I'm trying to think something similar.
You have to meet Christine Taylor's character, which is the blonde,
right?
Laura, the mean racist one. You have to meet her and hang out with her because she is the center point of the Rochelle character's story. And you meet Sarah's parents, but you don't get to know them well. You just need to know that she has a dad and like a stepmom, at least enough to that at the end when she's tricked into thinking they're dead, that can't be the first time you've heard of them. But that's all it is. They just need to just exist. But you're right. So the only they don't bother wasting time with characters that aren't really important to one of those four girls' main stories, which
and it is
I
impressive.
like. I mean, I like.
It's impressive having four women as the lead.
Tight.
But it goes to
very different characters. Totally different characters.
I mean, it's hard today to get things. I mean, now in the last like 3-4 years, and I don't mean to like ride that horse, but like being in the industry and having pitched things, and I know very firsthand, it's hard even today when you're pitching a female like lead in something, because people still have the old story of like, well, males won't watch content made for females, but females will watch content made for men. That's like the age-old Disney, like the heads of Disney will talk about it. I was listening to a podcast called like something about the princesses in Hollywood. And anyways, it was pretty awesome. But yeah, it's interesting that like you have four women, and also like Birds of Prey. Why is that movie rated R when most Marvel is PG-13? Because to see a woman get beat up versus a man, it changes the rating. To see a man have an orgasm, it's a PG-13. To see a woman have an orgasm, it's an R. So even today, where we've like progressed so much, we still have these sort of biases from women to men when the film revolves around women as opposed to men. And I think that's just, I just think it's super interesting.
I don't know. I don't think you can put everything in the same basket though either, because I walked out of Birds of Prey and like, there's some other bad superhero movies, but like, I just thought that was terrible. But there's a lot of other movies I've walked out of. It doesn't matter who's in it.
But that doesn't change its rating system. Like, why is that movie R when like Marvel's and most of those movies are all PG-13?
I think they were R because they were trying to go the Deadpool route, which was let's make a hard R to seem more like rough and rugged, and we're gonna swear. I don't know.
A lot of argument from us or anybody that the rating system is flawed.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you could be right.
Yeah.
It was just something that I thought was
I know
interesting.
what you mean, though. But that's more reflective of cultural reality, where it's true, where I do react differently seeing a man punch a man versus a man punch a woman in the face. Like, yeah, I do react differently. I don't know if that means you should change a movie's rating over it, but yeah, and it's a different sort of story you're telling, but that could just be from where I'm coming from, because
and it could be totally unrelated to anything. I just thought that was super interesting.
No, it is interesting. You're saying is super interesting, because you're right that it's like we have 4 main female leads and they all get stories, so what ends up happening in this movie is they all basically choose like a wish spell, and then they get it over time anyway. So you've got that love spell we talked about before, but then there's also, we mentioned, one character wishes away her scarring and it works, and another character, because she's been abused by this racist bully, that's the weirdest story arc for me, because she kind of like wishes that this girl lose her blonde hair, which is obviously a horrible emotional, but it's like, okay, that's kind of, it seems more like a prank. Like you could have swapped out her shampoo and done something pretty similar to that, and
put some Nair in there.
And Rochelle, the character Rochelle, she has this moment where she sees her bully crying in the shower, and it looks like she feels really bad about having cast the spell, except that I feel like there must have been a scene cut out, because the next real time we hang out with her after that, the remorse is totally gone, and she's fully on board with murdering Sarah like their best friend. And I was like, I didn't see enough of a turn to the dark out of Rochelle. I saw it out of Nancy. I saw it out of Bonnie. I thought that Rochelle, it was kind of weird for her at the very end. She felt like she was just kind of teaming up with the other two. Like, sure, let's kill her. We hate her now, in a very sort of cliquey way. I didn't see it. Is that just me?
No, I agree with you. And I kind of feel like some of the ending, like my only problem, if I have a problem with the movie, and I've always felt this, is I don't love the ending. I felt like you could have had a much more like, let's see her now that she's all powerful. Like, I want to see her do more than like cause lightning. I want to see her like, let's see her powers. Let's see what she can do. Let's have her come into school. Like, how cool is that scene where she like walks into school, and instead of like the 3 or 4 girls walking down, you have like her walking through, and like, just, I don't know. I thought like, I want to see more. Like that.
It felt like an origin story. Like now she's a superhero, and we want to see her fight like a god next.
Yeah, you want to see what happens.
Yeah. So, yeah, to exactly that point. Like, I think this inspired so much stuff. So there's a big thing going on whether or not Charmed was based off this movie. Uh-huh. This show Charmed that was on for years.
For years.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch came out after this movie, but I think like once people got this idea of like, oh yeah, wait, a witch in high school, yeah, Jessa, your thought is exactly what everyone else did. They're like, yeah, we're gonna take this and make the same thing. So much so where I read that the lead actress in The Craft, people come up to her all the time and they're like, oh, I loved you in Charmed. She's like, I'm not in Charmed. Like, yeah, if it's got a problem, we want to explore that world more. And in fact,
really
like
you in the Gilmore Girls, I wasn't in the Gilmore Girls. Oh, you were? I really loved it in Twilight. That movie's like 10 years after.
I can't believe you dumped Dawson.
So the ending is fascinating, right? So what ends up happening is the 3 girls turn on the new girl because the new girl is essentially saying, you guys need to be more responsible with your powers. And it ends up in this awesome, like, mano-a-mano, like, wizard fight, like, out of Lord of the Rings 2 Towers, between Fairuza Balk's character, Robin Tunney's character, Sarah and Nancy. So, like, I just thought it was interesting that they had set up pretty well everything that happened. So there's an image on the TV that makes Sarah think her family's dead. They had already talked about...
By the way, so dark.
Super crazy
dark. We're just kidding. That's what we do in high school. Like, when did it turn that they're killing her and convincing her parents are dead? Like, I get the, like, bugs coming out of toilets, which comes later, but like
when all the Indiana Jones.
Whoa! Can we talk about the snakes?
So many snakes.
Do you know how many snakes they used for that scene?
How many?
3,000. I'm out. That's probably why Angelina Jolie didn't want that.
Indiana Jones,
I'd be out so quick.
Movie, Rats another movie, Bugs another movie. The Craft is like, no, all at once.
Also, imagine being those actors in. It's 1996. I keep messing up this date. They they're like, just stand here really quick. We're gonna put some cockroaches down your shirt because CGI and special effects was not that good.
That screen test, I'd have been like, you know what? I'm just gonna go work at Applebee's and never really wanted to be an actor anyways. I'm out. I'm not dealing with 3,000 snakes on set. I'll never sleep again.
And oh man, and they have like this nice sort of like who gets to have the low angle? It was like a battle of the low angles. Like when Nancy has the upper hand, she's flying and it's like you're looking up at her chin and she's like, you are so pathetic. And then you flash forward 8 minutes in movie time and the tables have turned and now it's like we're looking up at Sarah and she's like, you are so pathetic. I'm not pathetic. You're pathetic.
How about that moment though?
An all-out battle.
Yeah, they like rise up, like all three of those girls. That's so like when I think about this movie, I think about walking in. I don't know why it's so eerie to me and creepy, but it still gets under my skin. That moment where they all three like rise up together and are like waiting for her right before the massive battle.
Yeah,
it's just like that.
Why is that they didn't let anything quite really close to that happen until that moment, which is almost at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
So it was like it was a nice big payoff to this extent. The whole movie's this long build up, and then it's like, wait a minute, they can fly. Except that you've seen enough of their powers. You saw the one levitation in the light as a feather, so that it's not like out of nowhere. Believe it, you believe it, but it is still the first time you've seen it, and you're like, oh, it got real. It got really.
The breadcrumbs they lay from a storytelling perspective and just to build up. That's why I think it holds up. Like this totally.
And nobody had done anything like this before. Like, let's keep in mind, like now we've all seen Charmed. Now we've seen all these other things. Like nobody had done something like this before. I think that's why it's so capsuled in my mind is that like before now we've seen so many of these, movies with witches and whatnot, but like nobody had done something like this at the time. And we were like, and I might be totally wrong and missing some.
Besides Bewitched, but like that's a totally different.
That's like a cute little
different,
little nosy.
Yeah, this is a little different subject matter.
If I had to choose a favorite moment, I would say my favorite moment is they go to the beach and they try to summon the god, and they kind of like succeed where there's this big thunderstorm over the water and they it looks like they pass out, but when the girls wake up they see that Nancy, Fairuza Balk's character, is walking on the water. That was
dope. That was really amazing,
right? And it's like that is well shot and well timed, and so you go, that was the amazing thing. And she starts talking about how I feel all this, and then you hear sirens. And the camera follows as these characters walk around a huge boulder in the sand, and it's revealed what the sirens are. And you see dead sharks lining up on the beach, heading off into the distance. And I was like, I don't know. There's no way you can see anything like that coming because you've never thought of that.
You know what that makes me
think of that.
When I see like that hard of a turn, I think like it reminds me of being in school in like kindergarten when you show up your first day at kindergarten and everyone's like, oh, Nick, hey, to meet everyone. Hey, this is great. This is class. Second day, they're like, all right, now it's time to get down to business. You're like, oh no, you're in it now. Like the first day's all sweet and like cool. And the second day, it's like, now, mother effer, it's time. We're gonna learn. And like, no.
I think the blood too. That moment where she's by the shark and she's like, they're for me. And then you see the blood on her hands. I feel like in terms of like storytelling, it's such an amazing, like you said, turn for the characters. Like, because you actually see now she has like blood on her hands. It was kind of cute and kind of fun.
The others aren't reacting the way that she's reacting. You can see specifically Sarah because we talk about character building through choices, but also just reactions. Like how a character reacts to a situation is who they are. And you watch how the character of Sarah and the character of Nancy react in totally different ways. Sarah's horrified. Nancy is delighted, and you're like, okay, cool. And it really defines the last part of that movie. That's probably my favorite moment. And the only other one I want to mention before we start to wrap this up is that we talk about how this movie is dark. The way the last scenes, it's really like the last shots of this movie before it cuts to credits are the character of Sarah turns to the other two and says, you don't want to end up like Nancy. And we don't know what's happened to Nancy. And it cuts to this shot of this extreme high angle, the God's eye view of her strapped to a bed in an asylum somewhere, screaming about how she has powers. And she comes in and gets a shot of some kind with some nurse who just kind of says, baby, you don't have any powers. And then she's like just writhing with Fairuza Balk acting her ass off, writhing in that bed with the camera moving nice and close on her face, and then it just cuts to black, and I'm like, that's disturbing. that's like the Joker level, like, punishment. you know?
Yeah.
Did Batman sentence her? Like, geez.
And that moment where she's stabbed, I mean, to me, the other moment that, like, just, I wouldn't say my favorite moment, but, like, the moment that, like, stands out to me in terms of nightmares for me was that moment where she's stabbing in midair against the wall so aggressively. Like, that particular moment, like, and that move where she, which now so many people have done, but I had never seen it before, where you, like, basically glide across the floor towards somebody with a knife. Like, people do that now all the time, where you're like, they move across something like that, but I'd never seen that before as a kid. And so seeing that moment and then her stabbing so, like, viciously into the wall, it's just this, like,
just aggressively hammering away, and
it
Fairuza
justifies that last shot where you're like, okay, fine, you can be.
She's unhinged. Yeah,
she's unhinged. Yeah. Also, just like trying to make her think she killed herself. Very dark. Very, very dark.
it is definitely dark.
She slits her wrists, not like her own.
She slits her own wrist.
Fairuza Balk slits Robin Tully's character's wrist with it, and she cuts her across. And she wrote her a suicide note and leaves it on. And she bleeds on.
I guess I'm really looking over. I'm talking about all these dark things. They also killed 2 people in this movie, which we haven't even talked about.
Is this a closet dark movie? I mean, I think it's definitely dark. Like, I think it's not portrayed as a dark movie, but it's pretty dark. Like, it's pretty vicious.
So
I think
to kill themselves, like, that's like maybe as dark as you can get.
I think this inspired a ton of other movies that came after it.
Yeah.
Think of, like, Jawbreaker. There's a ton of movies that, like, you could just have that crew and them not be witches and have a whole movie about it. You know what I mean? Like,
what's the male version of this? 4 guys. It wouldn't be interesting, right? Why is
it? They made it. They made a version, a guy version about this.
They did?
Yeah, the guy version was. Hang on. Oh, I just had to pull it.
I actually would be completely interested in also directing the guy version of that.
Not to be crude, but I think that the storyline about the love potion would probably be a little different.
Yeah,
I don't think.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
So allegedly, the movie Chronicle.
Oh yeah.
Was essentially the male version of The Craft, just an updated found footage version.
Chronicle is excellent. Chronicle is an excellent movie.
But what you were saying, like, you couldn't tell it in the same way. If you did the guy version, you have to do it different. You could take elements of the story and do it the same way.
Yeah.
But
I'm a big fan of found footage. Like, very unpopular opinion. Like, I loved the first Cloverfield. I liked Chronicle. Big fan of found footage movies. I don't know why I love that sort of, like.
I think it holds up, though. I think it holds up better than, like, a lot of CGI does. 10 years from now, like, I'll watch the original Blair Witch Project.
Absolutely.
Oh man, terrifying in its simplicity. Yeah.
Well, this was a lot of fun. I'm so glad that you joined us, Jessa.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I really think that we bothered. I'm glad we bothered to watch this movie too. I mean, it's just a little bit, just different enough from some of the other stuff that we usually do that it was a great little switch up for us to sort of, if you've been eating hot dogs for dinner every night, then it's like, let's try something different.
No, this was definitely a blast from the past, and it got me thinking as well, and sort of looking at it as an adult, definitely a whole new perspective on it. And it's interesting thinking about all these things that it was always just this movie that, inspired me and my friends to dress up. And now I see wow, this actually inspired all these different films as well.
It definitely did inspire. Yeah.
Revolutionary.
I wonder what would happen if people watched it when they watched this 20 years from now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or how they'll see it. Any final thoughts, Nick?
No, I do have to say my favorite line in the movie was they're driving to Santa Barbara. They get off that bus and the guy goes, "Hey, watch out for weirdos." And then they go, "We are the weirdos, mister."
Best line.
I just thought that was awesome.
Best
But
line.
I also sympathize with the bus driver. I'm like, all right, well.
And I go, cool. Glad you're off my bus.
But they were right. That's all I got.
Enjoy being nowhere. All right. Well, this is great. Thanks again, everybody, for
Thank
joining
you,
us.
guys.
Thanks, Jessa.
Thanks, Jessa. We'll
Thanks
do
so much.
another one of these in 2 days' time. The podcast will be available tomorrow morning, which would be Wednesday morning, on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. And you can always look up everything for Handlebar TV and Handlebar TV's YouTube channel. But until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Jessa. And thank you, Nick. And we will see you next time.